Hi, everyone. Welcome to the April meeting of Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm Flannery Winchester, CCL's Vice President of Communications, and I'm your host for this month's meeting. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the Q&A. Let us know where you're joining from, how many folks are there with you if you're watching with your chapter, and use the link in the chat to log your attendance on today's call. Thank you all for being here with us, and let's get started. So April is Earth Month, and we've got a ton going on, and we have a packed agenda today. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to start with recent news and successes, and then we will hear from our guest speaker, Emmy Award-winning meteorologist Kari Hall, and then we'll go through actions that you and your chapter can be working on this month. So let's start with our recent news and successes, and feel free to share any of your CCL personal wins or chapter successes in the Q&A, and if we have time, I'll read a couple of those out loud in a few minutes after I go through our national highlights. So at the national level, it's been a very busy few weeks since our last meeting. We've primarily been defending America's clean energy tax credits. So as you've heard us say over and over, these tax credits are at risk of repeal in the Republicans' budget reconciliation process this year. So we're working hard to make sure that Republican lawmakers understand the economic value of these tax credits and keep them in place. At our March call, we sent a flurry of emails to Republican offices, and then we shifted that into a push for calls. And all together in the last few weeks, we've generated 3,720 messages on this topic. And in the last few weeks, we've been pulling out all the stops. We've actually had CCLers in blue areas coordinating with chapters in red areas, calling CCLers on their roster to encourage them to call their Republican lawmakers. And our government affairs team has been working with our liaisons to hold a slate of targeted lobby meetings, specifically meeting with Republican Ways and Means committee members, since they're so integral to the discussion around tax credits. So great work to everyone who has been pushing so hard on this. And of course, it all kicked off with our conservative lobby day earlier last month, and it has just built more and more momentum from there. And one thing that's exciting about all this is the work itself, but also the work is getting noticed and it's getting results. So let's take a look at that. In the last couple of weeks, we've had some serious national media coverage, which is cool. So there's this piece in the New York Times with the headline, "The Republicans Pushing Trump to Save Biden's Clean Energy Tax Cuts." And the story includes coverage of our conservative volunteers lobbying. So there's that excerpt there saying Citizens Climate Lobby, a nonprofit group, held 2 days of events on Capitol Hill. After a day of preparation and training at a nearby Holiday Inn, dozens of the group's staff and volunteers met with congressional staff to talk up the merits of the tax credits. So that was a little mention in the New York Times. Then an article in The Guardian also noted that CCL lobbied 47 Republicans on Capitol Hill, calling on them to protect the tax credits, and is now asking its members to call their Republican representatives. Now, both of those two articles also mentioned other groups who are working to protect the tax credits, but then just this past week, E&E News did a full article just about CCL's work in this area. So the headline reads, "Climate Group Draws on Thousands-Strong Network in IRA Push." And it mentions our network of local chapters around the country with thousands of members. That's you guys. And the article goes on to quote Jen Tyler, our VP of Government Affairs, and also to note the local media work that you guys are generating out in the field. So here you can see this journalist, he quotes a letter to the editor written by Laurel Eastman in Montana, and he quotes another written by Karen Sumerand in Ohio. So shout out to some of our individual volunteers who your work in your local media markets got on the radar of this national reporter. So a huge round of applause to folks out in the field doing all this work. It's getting noticed, getting covered in these major ways. Very cool. And as I mentioned, we're beginning to see some results. So Republicans are speaking up in pretty public ways on this issue. So just after our March meeting last month, there was a group of 21 House Republicans who wrote a letter to their leadership in defense of these clean energy tax credits. And this is significant growth from a letter last fall. So in the fall, there was a letter with 18 House Republicans on it, but 4 of those representatives didn't return to this new Congress. So we had a net increase of 7 new members signing on to this new letter this year. And the letter just shows that more and more Republican House members are recognizing that these clean energy tax credits are benefiting their districts. Constituents and businesses don't want to lose them. And our calls and our messages and our lobby meetings have made it clear that these tax credits are delivering real economic value in communities nationwide at the same time that they are driving down climate pollution. So it's encouraging to see Republican lawmakers turning around and making that same argument to their party leadership. And then this past Thursday, a new letter came out from 4 Senate Republicans saying that same sort of thing. So one of the leads on this new letter is Senator John Curtis from Utah. CCL Utah has been building a great relationship with him for several years, started when he was in the House. And you may remember hearing Senator Curtis speak at our fall conference in December, where he said that CCL has been instrumental in creating the space for him to step up on climate issues. And now here he is, his first few months in the Senate. He's stepping up on this letter to leadership alongside Senators Murkowski, Tillis, and Moran. And at our conservative lobby day last month, our volunteers actually met with 3 of these 4 offices. So here again, we see that the messaging that we're giving to lawmakers is what they're turning around and then saying to their leadership. And so here's a little excerpt from the Senate letter. They're making the point that the United States produces some of the cleanest and most efficient energy in the world, and American companies have made investments in domestic energy production and infrastructure based on the current energy tax framework. That's the clean energy tax credits. And so they're saying that a wholesale repeal or termination of certain individual credits would create uncertainty across the energy sector and the broader economy. And they're basically arguing not to repeal those tax credits. So they're obviously making an economic argument, which is how we've been presenting the issue to them. But again, it's the Republicans recognizing that these clean energy tax credits are benefiting their states, and they're saying clearly, getting rid of these will be bad. Let's keep them. So we'll talk about how you can keep up this drumbeat throughout April and keep moving this needle. But these letters show that we are on track and we're steering the conversation in a really productive direction. Now, if that wasn't enough, we have also seen a new bill introduced that we're excited about. It's called the Foreign Pollution Fee Act. So this bill would apply a fee to some imported products based on their level of greenhouse gas emissions. So that means it will encourage other countries to produce those goods in a cleaner way, or it will drive more business toward American businesses who are already producing goods cleaner than other countries are. And ultimately, this reduces global emissions. So as a climate organization, lower emissions are exactly what we want. So right now, our focus remains those clean energy tax credits, but you can go ahead and mark your calendar for May 22nd, when we will hold a training to dive into the details of this new bill and what you can do to help it advance. So just put a pin in that for next month. And the last big success from this month that I want to shout out is our successful March fundraiser. So not only did we meet our original goal of $10,000 in new or upgraded monthly donations, but we exceeded our first stretch goal of $11,000 and our second stretch goal of $12,500. So that means that we can take advantage of $150,000 in gift match funds. And the March campaign is only one of 2 big fundraisers that we do every year. So its success is a really huge win, and it was only possible with all of your support. So thank you to everyone who donated or who shared the fundraiser throughout your networks. And if you didn't have a chance to give during March, you can always go to cclusa.org/donate and support our work anytime year-round. Or if you'd like to speak with a member of our development team, you can reach them at development@citizensclimate.org. All right, so that's what we're celebrating at the national level. And I will take a look at the chat and see what local successes you're mentioning here. I also am seeing some introductions and maybe some questions mixed in. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and move on to our guest speaker. I'll look at that individually in the Q&A, but I'll turn now to our guest speaker, Kari Hall. So Kari is a meteorologist for NBC Bay Area's morning newscast Today in the Bay, and her career has spanned the country. So she has covered Hurricanes Katrina, Rita, and Gustav when she was in Louisiana. She's covered tornadoes and snowstorms and all of it when she was at WKYT in Kentucky. Then she served as Chief Meteorologist at News 12 in Connecticut. She's a member of the American Meteorological Society and a leader with the Climate Reality Project. And Kari's won 2 Emmy Awards for her weather and climate coverage. So we wanted to have Kari on this month because it's Earth Month. It's always a time when the public is paying a little extra attention to environmental issues. They might be hearing a little more about it. So we thought it would be great to learn from you, Kari, about how and why you communicate to the general public about climate change. And before I hand it over to you, I'll give a shout out to CCL's own Meteorologist Outreach Action Team for putting Kari on my radar. The volunteers in that action team work to encourage their local meteorologists to cover climate change in their news and their social media communications to help heighten public awareness and understanding of the problem and of solutions. And Kari was the first recipient of this team's Climate Coverage Champion Award last spring. So thanks to those CCLers for bringing Kari to our attention at the national level. And Kari, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Flannery. And I am just so honored to be here with all of you this morning. So once again, my name is Kari Hall. I'm morning meteorologist at NBC Bay Area. I'm just so grateful to be here today. And I'm going to give you a little bit of the perspective of being a journalist covering climate change, what inspires me, as well as what keeps me going. I always think it's so interesting to hear people's life story and how they got to where they are. So I'm going to share a little bit of my story, and then I'll go on to talk about my workday, how I cover climate, the resources available to me, as well as some of my limitations. I just celebrated 20 years as a meteorologist, and next month will mark 10 years of being at NBC Bay Area at my current position of morning meteorologist. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was just always fascinated by the weather. I just never imagined myself doing anything different, and it really didn't hurt that, I grew up in a place where you just have all kinds of weather. So that helped me develop that interest and keep going. I went to Mississippi State University. I got my degree in geosciences with an emphasis in broadcast meteorology, and then moved on to get my first job in Lafayette, Louisiana. That first year in television was just wild. So I was already beginning to cover climate change. Back then, at that time, it was all about being green, right? And so I talked to farmers, sugarcane farmers there in Louisiana, crawfish, talked about the rice crop. And it's just an area that is just so steeped in just the rich heritage and tradition. And there's a large population of people who just truly live off the land. And so they're just so much more connected to the environment and the earth. And I think it may be a little bit more so than you see in, of course, the larger cities. I reported on how the wetlands are disappearing, and about every 100 minutes, a football field of the Louisiana wetlands just basically disappears. I toured the coast in a helicopter, got to see some of those areas, as well as, just talking to people who are being displaced because of the disappearing wetlands. So my first year in Louisiana, Hurricane Katrina happened. It was just surreal watching this monster of a storm in the Gulf, and it was just coming right for us. So I'm going to share with you some of the images of that time. So there you go. That's Hurricane Katrina. It was just, like I said, just surreal. We were working all hands on deck. It was all reporters, everyone from every department working around the clock, as well as also sleeping there at the station. We had people from all of our sister stations, from national news. They came down, they were sleeping in RVs behind the station. I mean, we just knew that this was going to be the storm of the century. And we had a good week heads up with the forecast. And just a few days out, that track started to turn a little bit more east, which for us meant that we would be spared in central coastal Louisiana. but that would make a more direct hit to New Orleans. And you may remember those scenes of trying to evacuate hundreds of thousands of people west out of the city, which brought them either to our area in Lafayette or further west to Houston along I-10. So we had all lanes of I-10 going in one direction. They call it contraflow. So when Katrina made landfall, that was on August 29th of 2005. It was a Category 4 hurricane. It weakened just a little bit before it made landfall. And afterwards, we thought, okay, there was some wind damage. You know, it's not something that we've never seen before. It was pretty bad, but then the levees broke. And when that happened, it was like all hell just broke loose. So at that time, you know, I know that some of you all lived through this, either through watching on TV, through some of your loved ones, or you were there yourself. And, you know, I don't think there was a single soul who was prepared for what would happen next. All of the lives that were lost, the destruction, you know, the things that people had to do to save themselves, people punching holes in their attics to get to their roofs, to just sit there for days and wait to be rescued. I mean, it was just a disaster in every sense of the word. And we know now that more than 1,800 people died. And there was really no time to really like reconnect and recover after all of this, because just 3 weeks later, there was Hurricane Rita. And Hurricane Rita was more of a direct hit to where we were in Lafayette, Louisiana. This is a look at the evacuation where they once again did contraflow, trying to get so many thousands of people out of harm's way. This was a time when I was able to personally witness what a hurricane could do. I went out on a boat with Wildlife and Fisheries. I helped them with rescues, and it just basically turned coastal Louisiana into the Gulf. It was all completely underwater. And that went on to become a record-breaking season in terms of the activity, the intensity of the storms. We went all the way into the Greek alphabet that year, which was a record until 2020 when we broke that record again. So I just experienced so much there. I learned a lot. Here's a little bit of the video that they did during the anniversary in Louisiana of some of the damage that happened during Hurricane Rita. There's no audio or anything. I just wanted to show some of the video of what it was like at that time, and how they're still recovering in some of those areas because of that. So I went to Alexandria, and then I went to work back in my home state of Kentucky. I worked in Lexington at WKYT, and I was there for a few years until we had the big tornado outbreak of March 2nd, 2012. I witnessed the damage of 18 tornadoes that touched down, some of which were rated an EF3. Some of them were long track tornadoes. It was just really mind-blowing being in the midst of all of that and covering that and trying to give people the information to help them get to safety. This is a look at a tornado that tore through a town called West Liberty, Kentucky. And in this tornado, several people died. You can see from this camera here from someone's house just how destructive and how fast things change for them. So this is a look at the coverage that I found online, and you can just see how devastating that was on the ground there. And I went there the next day and just noticed how the destruction from a tornado is just so different from the devastation from a hurricane. There would be one house that was just completely twisted and destroyed, and then the house next to it was like untouched. And as I would walk down the street and all of that destruction, you would see a kid's artwork and a shoe and a toothbrush, like all of these little pieces that made up someone's life. And then you would look at something like a wooden board and there would be a piece of hay sticking out of it. It was just like mind blowing how the wind could do this type of destruction. So I went continued there for a while, for a few years there in Kentucky. I'm just showing you some of the more of the damage that happened during that severe weather. But eventually after that, I got the opportunity to move to Connecticut. I moved right outside of New York City, right after the Superstorm Sandy, as a lot of you all went through. And that included working in 2013, where there was this bomb cyclone nor'easter in March that dumped a couple of feet of snow there. So I was only there for a couple of years before I moved to the Bay Area. So I got the job there at NBC Bay Area, and I arrived in the midst of the 2015 mega drought. And since then, it's been like wildfires, oppressive heat, floods. I mean, we know that this weather happens, but it just seemed like it was so often that we could barely catch our breaths. And I started to think to myself, there's all of this severe weather everywhere I've been. Is it following me? Or is it that, this is something that's just constantly happening everywhere? And for me, I think what stuck out the most was in seeing who was affected by a lot of this. It was lower income, it was a lot of Black and brown people, and they were being impacted the most by all of this. And I really felt like I couldn't just continue to report the weather without giving perspective and also giving a call to action. So in 2020, in BC Bay Area, as well as across the network, in the midst of the pandemic and all of that going on and record-breaking weather, we launched Climate in Crisis, the graphic that you're seeing there.
With that, we, as a network, decided that we were going to continue to cover climate change. And we also hired a national climate reporter, Chase Kane. And Chase Kane came to us from actually another network and has just been a really great resource to provide us some daily information on, just climate stories. So I encourage you all to look up Chase Kane, follow him. He does some really great work. And then we'll also share those links to our website. So for me, I do mornings. I do morning weather, so I don't really go out and report very often. And I wanted to share my process of reporting, which is a lot different for everyone. So this is something that I chose to do, not only as a network, but also, as and something that's really passionate to me. I basically, between shows, between my weather hits, instead of taking a lunch break, I'm doing virtual interviews. I'm looking for new research coming out of local universities. And, it's really great that I'm in the Bay Area, and it's home to UC Berkeley and Stanford. And they're all dedicated to not only climate research, but also they have like forward thinking research about climate. And then San Francisco State is also dedicated to climate. And they're one of the first universities in the country to require all majors to take a climate justice course. Just regardless of your major. So that's been pretty awesome. And we just have so much innovation in the Bay Area as well, with people who work in agriculture and green energy and just the technology. And over the years, that's really provided us with a wide range of topics to cover. So I do work odd hours as a morning meteorologist. I wake up at 2 a.m. And when I'm doing weather, I'm not able to really leave the building. And so I'm doing these stories on top of my regular weather duties, and mostly during my lunch break. And I have really become impassioned to like work that into my workflow. So those are my limitations, the fact that, I'm not really going out there and able to show you what's happening or really dive deep into some of the deeper, more complex climate stories that are going on. But you can see some of the coverage that we have here on our Climate in Crisis webpage, where as it scrolls down, you can see the variety of stories that we have. And there's a story about the penguins that Chase Kane did. He just came back from Antarctica. And Also, I use Climate Central. It's been a really great resource for me. They provide graphics, visuals. It can be a great tool for just like localizing a story with a lot of data. And also, I know that quite a few of you are familiar with the resources on Climate Central. They have meteorologists, they have graphics, and they really try to make it easier for us in general with a small time allotted for climate coverage to be able to have something meaningful. And Covering Climate Now is also a great resource for me. They have regular trainings and discussions, and they also have articles about what's happening around the world. Many of you may know about their new initiative called the 89% Project. They highlight the studies revealing that 89% of the world's people want stronger government and climate action. And they also encourage newscasters to have more climate coverage as well. So that's also been a very great resource for me in trying to cover climate. So as the past 5 years as a network, we have committed to show the link between climate impacts at every possible opportunity, which means that we basically have a climate story every day somewhere in our newscasts. And with our sister stations nationally, we team up, we have monthly meetings, we share ideas, we see if there's something happening in Boston, maybe we can localize it to the Bay Area. And for me also, I just like personally, I wanted to have more training on climate coverage and climate change. So that's why I became a climate leader with the Climate Reality Project and got that training from former Vice President Al Gore. So that's my process working in news. I know it's different for every meteorologist, and we compiled all of those stories on our website, nbcbayarea.com. But as the face of the person who's talking about climate change, I become the alarmist or the one that's sharing fake news, or I'm part of the crazy woke folk, something that I've heard recently. Um, or I'm just like talking about a non-issue according to some of the criticism. And unfortunately, the majority of the comments come from the minority of the climate deniers. And so the ones who really, that I found like really appreciate the climate information, sometimes they're silent and don't really engage. And it's part of the reason why I don't really post on X anymore, because it can be very critical. I am still active, very active on Facebook and Instagram, and I post a lot of my stories there. And for our station, they actually track our engagement on social media. It's almost like, how popular are you, or how well liked are you? And if I'm posting a lot of climate stories and it's silent, then that can be seen as I'm not very likable, and that can actually be factored into contract negotiations and my salary and things like that. So honestly, like social media can become part of our our personal ratings. We have ratings as a station, but that's just kind of how it works. I find that if I post a lot of climate stories, no one comments. And then when I post a selfie or like a picture of my kids or something, it gets a lot of engagement, comments, and likes and things like that. So what I always encourage people is to make sure that you are liking, commenting, saying thank you on those stories that are climate stories that you're seeing from your local stations, because that will encourage them to do more of that. And it's like I said, it's like sometimes the critics are screaming louder than the supporters. But it really meant so much to me to be honored by the Citizens Climate Lobby for what can be sometimes a thankless job. And, some people will comment more on my hair or my clothes rather than my commitment to climate education or giving you your weather forecast. And so I just wholeheartedly admire what all of you are doing across the country, the work that you're doing. I mean, you're the real climate warriors out there, and I appreciate the change that you are all making in your community. And, it's really just been my honor to be here with you today and sharing a little bit of what it's like as a meteorologist covering climate change. Please ask any questions you have, and I can take the suggestions as well of what I can do as a media member of covering climate change. What do you think I can do better?
Thank you so much, Kari. That was very, very interesting to have a window into how you approach this stuff and how you have to fit it into your schedule. Thank you for making the effort to do that. And we've got a few questions, a lot of them, and I think we have time just for one. But a lot of them are in the area of what can we do with our own local meteorologists to encourage them to talk about climate change, to cover this more. So I heard the tip of, engage with them on social media, give positive feedback when they do start to speak up. But is there anything else that you would advise us to do to encourage our local meteorologists to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, I think that, for the most part, we don't want to just always talk about, how the weather is getting more severe, or, how things are just so negative, because that can be daunting as well. And, a lot of people suffer through that burden of dealing with it and feeling like it's just an insurmountable challenge that we have right now. So the good thing is, the work that you all are doing in the community, we want to be able to focus on those things, but a lot of times we don't know about them, or we hear about it afterwards. If you're doing, if you're lobbying, for a bill or something like that, or if there's something in particular you're working on, you have an event, we want to hear about those things in advance so that we can cover them, and also talk about all of the great things that are happening with the climate warriors like you all.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I wish we had time to ask so many more questions, but we do need to move on to the rest of our agenda. If you want to take a look at the Q&A, feel free to hop in there if there's anything else you want to respond to. But thank you again, Kari, so much for being here. And we've dropped the link to your Facebook page in the chat so that folks can follow along and boost that engagement on your climate stories. So thank you again. All right. Now let's take a look at the actions that you can be working on this month within your chapter. So let's see. So first off, you can encourage actions at local Earth Month events. So as you know, and as I've mentioned, April is Earth Month. Typically, we would do a live action here during our monthly meeting, but since it's Earth Month, our focus this month is all about getting out in the community, getting in front of your members of Congress while they're home. And Earth Day itself is on April 22nd. So this creates lots of great opportunities for grassroots outreach, whether it's tabling, giving presentations, hosting social events. All of these activities are chances to mobilize people into action and recruit new volunteers. So our April action sheet has guidance about how you can use these grassroots outreach opportunities in service of our advocacy goals with Congress. So right now for Republicans, as we've talked about, we are really pushing them to protect these clean energy tax credits. And for Democrats, we're continuing to build the case for clean energy permitting reform. So there are more details in the action sheet about how to lean into each of these particular policy areas as you're out there tabling or presenting or just chatting with folks during Earth Month. And the next thing you'll find on the action sheet is guidance about asking people to take action at your April events. So it's a sample conversation that you might have at a tabling event, gives you a chance to practice, snagging a passerby, opening up the conversation, and then directing that conversation toward having them take action. So all that's in the April action sheet. Our next action that we want you to do during April is to plan a spring drop-off at your member of Congress's district or state office. So your members of Congress will be working in their district and state offices from April 14th to the 25th. So they're home in your area rather than in DC for a while. You can use this opportunity to highlight our climate priorities to them. And this month, your liaison will schedule a short visit to the local office, and you can plan to attend, along with other local CCLers in the area. Together, you'll drop off materials showing how much local support there is for CCL's climate policies that we're advocating for. So again, for Republicans, we're pushing hard on those clean energy tax credits. And I'll note, you may have seen some coverage on the recent vote in the House, and that was still just a vote on the level of cuts that each chamber will try to achieve in the budget reconciliation. So the discussions are still very much underway about what to cut. So now is still prime time to be making the case for those clean energy tax credits. And for Democrats, we're continuing to build a case for clean energy permitting reform. So for your drop-offs, you can bring signed constituent letter forms, handwritten letters from your chapter meetings, any recent media coverage that you've generated on either of those topics. And again, that sends a really strong message of local support for these policies. And all the details about that are in that April action sheet. Something else to think about during April is to plan a welcoming social event for new members. So we usually have an uptick in new volunteers joining during Earth Month. So think about having an event to help those new folks feel connected and get in the swing of things with CCL. You could do like a coffee and climate meetup at a local cafe, or a little walk and talk at a park, or a little hiking trail, game night, some kind of a mixer. All sorts of ideas and guidance for that are on the April action sheet. And last but not least, something you can do this month is register for our summer conference. So this is your chance to visit Capitol Hill with us if you'd like to lobby your members of Congress in person. You all know that the political landscape has changed in the last few months. And also, you're probably aware, lots of other groups are backing away from federal climate work. So that means that our presence on the Hill and the respectful, focused way that we approach our federal advocacy work is absolutely crucial. It's really up to us now to keep climate top of mind for Congress and to be able to have these conversations with lawmakers all along the political spectrum. So the event will be July 20th through the 22nd in DC this year. You can get to DC on Sunday the 20th, get settled in. We'll have a film screening that night, some evening activities. Then Monday, July 21st will be our jam-packed conference day. We'll have programming focused on giving you all the context and the training that you need for a successful lobby day. And then Tuesday the 22nd, we'll head to Capitol Hill for all our meetings with lawmakers, and then we'll have a little after-party kind of reception back at the Omni Hotel that night. So registration has just opened, and if you register before May 15th, you'll lock in your lobby spot, and you'll also get the early bird rate, so you can save some money on your registration. So head to that link, cclusa.org/summer to register.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.